Hi, my name is Bill Vandenbush. In 1968, I joined the Army and volunteered to be an infantry soldier and go to Vietnam. I did that because I didn't really understand what the Vietnam War was all about. I was a young man, and I grew up in Southern California. I was a hippie when I got out of high school, long hair, bell-bottom pants, used to hang out and smoke dope and all of that kind of stuff. And one day, on my way back from an anti-war protest, I started to ask myself, why was I protesting this war? I grew up at a time where we had war heroes. We had heroes from World War II. We had heroes from the Korean War. And I didn't understand why the men coming back from Vietnam were not heroes. Because all the other wars produced heroes, produced men of esteem. And I just wanted to know. I didn't even know where Vietnam was. I had no idea. So my buddy and I went down and joined the Army. It wasn't our first choice, mind you. We actually, we wanted to go into the Air Force, but there was a long wait to get into the Air Force. We wanted to go in the Navy. There was a long wait to get in the Navy. Ultimately, we went to the Army, asked how long the wait was. The guy said, how soon can you have your bags packed? And we were out the door and on our way. So I went through basic training, and I went through advanced infantry training, and I went through a couple of other special trainings to prepare for Vietnam and understand the culture and some of the other things that we had to learn to go over there and fight. And in July of 1968, I was on an airplane headed for Vietnam. And I got there, and I was very surprised that the war zone was much different than I thought it would be. It was much more frightening than I ever imagined it would be. And I realized when I got there that this is for real. This isn't a game, it's not training, but this is real life, life and death. I spent 10 months in combat. I became a very hardened combat soldier. We fought in firefights and big battles frequently. I saw my friends die. I saw men fall dead right next to me. I saw people die in my arms. I saw the enemy die. Death was everywhere. And I didn't even have any idea how I continued to live. The only exception was that I had two very, very good friends there, John and Hank. And John and Hank and I made a pact. We came from different parts of the country. Hank was from New York, John was from Detroit, and I was from Los Angeles. Very, very different parts of the country. But we bonded almost immediately. And we made a pact that said that as long as the three of us were together, we would cover each other's back and protect each other. I learned a lot from that. I learned that 3 or 4 or 5 people are much stronger than one individual. I learned that when we all work together to cover each other's back, we get the job done and we stay protected. On April 17th, 1969, my two friends, John and Hank, left to go on R&R. And I was left behind. The company commander assigned me to a squad as a squad leader and told me that we were just going to head into base camp and that we would be taking it easy for a few days. And I thought this was great. My buddies are in R&R. I get to hang out in the rear, drink some beer, smoke a little, have a good time, enjoy myself. But about, maybe 2 miles from the base camp, we got a call on the radio that a helicopter was shot down. So the company commander asked for volunteers, squads to volunteer. I volunteered my squad, 2 others volunteered, and the commander took his headquarters squad. We got on a helicopter and we went looking for this down chopper. When we got to the area that it had gone down in, we were taking heavy fire. As we got off the chopper, it was pure chaos. We were taking fire from all sides. I didn't think we'd even get off the chopper alive. But I managed to get my squad off into an area where it was safe, where they had some cover. And we began making a plan. I looked over at the company commander and he gave me some hand signals which indicated that I should move around the base of the hill, take my squad and set up so that we could move forward and move in around the downed helicopter. So I took my squad and we moved there, and the commander took his squad and the other squads and went around the other direction. And I managed to get my squad in behind a hedgerow where they could be safe, where they could have some cover. But I stayed back a little ways. I stayed back in an indentation in the ground where I could see what was going on so that I could direct their fire. Well, the firefight raged on, and I realized that we were outmanned. We weren't going to get anywhere in this. We were pinned down. We couldn't move. And I thought that, we've got to do something to get out of this. At this time, my squad was still intact, but the company commander, unbeknownst to me, had called in an airstrike to try to drive the North Vietnamese or Viet Cong, whichever they were, away from our position. I looked up in the sky and I saw the airplanes coming. And I watched as they dropped their first load on the top of the hill. And I thought to myself, if those guys drop those bombs just a minute or two sooner, they're going to land right on my position. And sure enough, the next time around, they let those bombs fall and they came right down where I was. I was blown up. I took shrapnel in the face. My eye was ripped out. I had shrapnel in my neck, down my right side. And I thought that I was going to die. Right there, 19 years old, thousands of miles from home, no mom to kiss it and make it better. I was going to die. I took my pack off and I took my helmet off. And the next thing I know, everything was peaceful and calm. There was no more war. I was in a dark tunnel, moving into a bright white light. And when I entered that white light, suddenly everything was wonderful. Life was wonderful. There was unconditional love. There was joy. There was peace. There was no responsibility for anything. There was no stress or pressure. Just peace and happiness. A joy like I've never felt before in my life. I stood there for a few minutes, and I was approached by a ball of energy. And when it got close to me, I realized that this was my grandfather, who had passed away about 5 years earlier. It was his spirit. And we spoke, and he welcomed me in. He took me in and guided me to this place, and I was full of joy and love. I was full of care. I was full of concern for all the goodness in life. All the bad things had disappeared. There was nothing but goodness. I was so happy. I was so full of joy. And as we stood and we talked, he told me how wonderful things would be. He told me that I would come there and I would find peace and I would find my way, and that he would take me with him and show me the way. But just as we were beginning to move further in, another ball of energy came up. Very friendly, but obviously an authority figure. And I was told that I had to go back. I had to return. I couldn't stay there. It wasn't my time. And it was time for me to go back, and that I had a higher purpose to fulfill. I had something that I had to do before I could come to that place. And they explained that that purpose was to heal myself and then to heal others. And I was told that as soon as I left, that I would return at the same time that I left. I turned around, I stepped back into the dark tunnel, and I was back on the battlefield. I could smell the war. I could smell the gunpowder, and I could smell the smell of Vietnam, that stench, that hot, humid stench. But I was not in pain anymore. I was surrounded by white light. I had no concerns. I had no worries. I was told when I was up in that light that no matter what happens on this day, I would survive, and I would go on to live a long and productive life. So I had no worries about death or dying or the consequences of the injuries that I had sustained. And as I started to get up off the ground, I hollered at my men to stay down, that I would get help. And as I turned, I saw one of my men crawling over to me, and he'd been shot in the gut. I took his pack off, and I held him in my arms, and he died. I knew that he was going where I had just come from. And I talked to his soul, his spirit, as it left his body, and I told him to just accept where he was going, that it was a good thing, that everything would be wonderful. And for a moment, our spirits connected, and I knew that he would be my brother for the rest of life. Which is interesting because he and I did not get along well. We didn't like each other very much. We never got along well. We didn't speak much. But I knew at that moment that we were connected. We were brothers. As I started to get up, I looked to my left and I saw a Viet Cong soldier come out of the bushes, and he pointed his AK-47 at me, and he opened up on full automatic, and he shot me 5 times to the arm, chest, and neck. I saw the bullets come out of his gun. I felt them enter my body, but there was no pain, no worry, no concern. I was still shrouded by this white light, by this experience that I had had. I still felt that all was well and that I would survive this day. So I picked up my rifle and I fired back. Now, I don't think I hit him, but I think I scared the living hell out of him. After he left, or maybe I hit him and killed him. I don't know what happened. I got up and I walked about 300 yards to where the company commander was, because he had the medics with his squad and he had the radios with his squad. And when I got there, the medics came running up to me and they put their hands on me. And immediately I was back in my body. I let go. I just let go and I let them take care of me. And they patched me up as best they could, put me on a chopper and sent me to a field hospital. At the field hospital, they didn't think there was anything they could do to save me. They thought that I was going to die. They put me on a gurney and stuck me in a hallway, called in some people from my company to identify me, and just left me laying there. I don't know how much time elapsed, but eventually a nurse came out and looked at me, realized that I was still alive, took me back in. They did what they could to stabilize me, gave me some blood, some plasma, and shipped me off to a bigger hospital. And from that hospital to another hospital. And eventually I wound up on a hospital ship in Da Nang Harbor. The hospital ship was comforting. And I had been conscious the whole time. I had been aware of what was happening to me. I was aware that I was very, very badly wounded. My face was crushed in. I had head injury. My throat was ripped out. My chest was ripped open. I had a sucking chest wound. My left arm was torn almost completely off. And I knew that I had a long road ahead of me. But I had no concern, no worry about it. I knew that that spirit would take care of me. All I had to do was have a little faith. I had a little trust. It took me several months to get home. I had to go through Japan for a couple of months, and I was sent to an Air Force hospital and finally to Fort Ord Army Hospital in California. I spent several more months at Fort Ord Army Hospital, and I was still connected to this spirit. I just knew that everything would be good. I needed to take inventory. I needed to reassess my entire life. I needed to think about where I was going and what I was going to do. When I left high school, I had no desire to go to school ever again. In fact, I said to myself as I walked out of graduation, having graduated at the bottom of my class, that I don't ever want to step into a classroom ever again. And yet, after all this in Vietnam, the only thing I could think about was to get an education. I was hungry for knowledge. I thirsted for that knowledge, and I knew that I had to go get it. So I came home, and I went to college. Life had its ups and downs. You know, I would love to tell you that being connected to this spirit made everything wonderful through life. But it didn't. It didn't at all. In fact, I spent a lot of time lost. I spent a lot of time searching to find that path. In college, I had studied auto mechanics. When I came home from Vietnam, I couldn't speak, so I wanted to be a psychologist, but the psychology professor said, well, you can't speak well enough to be a psychologist. You have to be able to talk very plainly and clearly. And it took me many years to learn to talk. But in the meantime, I studied auto mechanics because I thought that would be better. In fact, I even went so far as to open my own auto shop and did well at it. But it was not very fulfilling. Not at all. And I sold my shop and I took a job in an automotive research firm, doing all kinds of research for the government and for the oil companies, and it was interesting. It was interesting work, but I still felt unfulfilled. I still felt that I was not doing what I needed to be doing. And the company I worked for sent me from Los Angeles to Seattle, Washington, and then promptly laid me off. Now, they offered me another job in California, and they offered me a job in Alaska, but I felt that I needed to stay in Seattle. I'm not sure why. I just had this burning sense that I needed to stay there. I needed to find that spirit again. I needed to find that drive, that passion. And I struggled. I couldn't find a job. I ended up homeless. I ended up on the street. Eventually, through a series of very unique events, I found my path. And I found it because I listened to what people told me. I listened to people who, when they told me what my skills were, what my abilities were, when they started to tell me what directions I should go or where I would be good, even though I didn't believe them, I followed it. I followed that path. Eventually, I got a good job. I was able to go back to school and get a master's degree. I was able to put my life together. I still struggled from time to time. But I never told this story. I never told it to anybody until about 1989. It was late 1989. And I was taking a class called Confrontations with Living and Dying. And it was a class about our confrontations with death and what it means to the living. And one of the very first things that happened in this class is the instructor told us to break up into small groups and to talk about our most profound experience with death. Now, I had never talked about my own near-death experience. I had never talked about, all the death that I experienced in Vietnam. And I thought, do I really want to tell this story, or do I just want to shine them on with some BS that I could make up and get by? And I thought, no, I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to tell this story about what happened to me on the battlefield. And I told the story about being blown up and shot, about going into the white light. And at the time, I had no idea that this was, that this had a name. But as soon as I finished speaking, the professor came up to me. He'd been listening to me. And he said, well, what you had was a near-death experience. And you should talk about this more. There are people in town who know about this and can talk to you about this. And I thought, yeah, I don't really want to go there. I just did this for class, and that's it. I've got it out once. That's it. I'm not going to talk about it again. A year went by, an entire year. And I was in a library in Parkland, Washington, and I saw a bulletin on the bulletin board that said, International Association for Near-Death Studies meets here Saturdays at 1 o'clock. And I thought, this is what that professor was talking about. And I thought, all right, I get it. The Spirit's talking to me. I'll go to the meeting. So I went to the meeting, and I told my story. And they said, oh, you got to go to Seattle to the big group and talk to them. Well, this group was about 6 or 7 people, and it was a little uncomfortable to talk in front of 6 or 7 people, but I thought the bigger group is probably, twice that size, maybe even 20 people. And I thought, okay, I can go there, and I don't have to talk right away, but, I can kind of hang out with 20 people and talk about this kind of stuff. So I go to the meeting in Seattle, and there's not 20 people there. There's 150 people there. And it scares me to death. And the leader of the group came over and asked me if I would be willing to come up and speak. And I said that I would. And I got up and I spoke. And the next thing you know, I'm on TV, I'm speaking at conferences, and wonderful things began to happen as I began to reconnect with this spirit and talk about this experience and to bring this to the forefront. And I began to learn more and more about myself. I began to learn about the value of being a warrior. I began to learn that a warrior is not someone who wages war. A warrior is someone who wages peace. A warrior has the ability to defend himself and to defend others. But that's not his prime purpose. His prime purpose is to find peace and to bring peace and happiness to others. His prime purpose is to go out and help others to heal, to help others to find happiness and fulfillment. That's the job of a warrior. That's what a warrior does. I spent the next 20 years doing just that. I wrote a book. The book is called If Morning Never Comes, and it's a very detailed account of my experiences. I spent years and years talking to people all over the country. I appeared on television shows all over the world, telling people about this experience, about the peace, the unconditional love that happens when you die, when you go into that white light. But I also talked about the need to live this life. It would be easy because we could just take our own lives and go to that white light. But that's not what it's about. It's not about dying, it's about living. Death is inconsequential. We don't need to worry about death. We don't even need to be concerned. It will come. It will come. Happens to everybody. But in the meantime, we've got to live our lives. We've got to find peace. We've got to find happiness. We've got to find joy. We've got to find love. We've got to find caring. In addition to just finding it, we've got to share it. We've got to give it back. We've got to spend time with the people that have meaning in our life. And it's not just our family, but it's other people that need to hear what we have to say. Veterans and warriors are very, very special people. They're people that have a great amount of strength. They have a great amount of power. They have a great amount of love to give. I hope that all of you will find that love within yourself, will find that peace within yourself, and will spend some time giving that back to others. Thank you very much for listening to me. I really appreciate the fact that you allow me to speak to you. Thank you very much.